Marcus had worked hard for years, building his business from the ground up. Now, after reaching a big milestone, he was ready to treat himself. He decided to go to one of the most high-end restaurants in the city to celebrate. He had heard great things about it, a place with a fancy atmosphere, exceptional food, and top-notch service. Dressed in a sharp suit and feeling accomplished, he walked confidently through the doors, excited for the evening ahead. As soon as Marcus stepped inside, he noticed something strange. While the other guests were being greeted with warm smiles and friendly conversation, the staff seemed to be cold towards him. Some of the other patrons looked over at him with judgmental eyes, but Marcus didn't let it bother him. He was used to people sometimes having a narrow view of him. He kept his head high and reminded himself that this night was about celebrating his success. He was soon escorted to his table, where a waitress, Donna, stood waiting. At first, her greeting was brief and uninviting. She gave him a tight smile, barely making eye contact, before quickly handing him the menu. Marcus, who was used to being treated with respect, was a bit surprised by her attitude, but he decided not to make a big deal of it. He thanked her and began looking over the menu, trying to decide what to order. Dana's behavior only got worse as the meal went on. She hardly said a word to Marcus as she took his order, speaking as if she couldn't care less. When Marcus asked if the restaurant had any specialty dishes, she simply shrugged and gave a curt response. He tried to keep his composure, reminding himself that this was supposed to be a special occasion, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the night went on, it became clear that Dana was treating him differently than the other guests. She went out of her way to be friendly with the tables around him, even laughing and joking with the other diners, but with Marcus, she barely said a word. It didn't seem to matter that he had come to the restaurant to celebrate his achievements. He was being ignored, and he couldn't help but feel that her behavior was linked to his appearance. But Marcus wasn't one to let things slide. He had worked too hard to let a single bad experience ruin his evening. He held his head up and continued to enjoy his meal, making an effort not to let Dana's coldness get to him. However, his patience was about to be tested in ways he could never have predicted. What Marcus didn't know was that Dana wasn't just ignoring him. She was actively judging him, and her actions would soon have consequences that would change everything. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. Dana's behavior was about to come to light, and the night's events were about to take an unexpected turn that no one could have foreseen. As Marcus settled into his seat, he tried to shake off the strange feeling that something wasn't quite right. The restaurant's ambience was meant to be relaxing, with soft music playing in the background and the low hum of conversations all around. Yet despite the warm setting, Dana's attitude toward him left a sour taste in his mouth. He had worked hard to get to this point in his life, and all he wanted was a nice, peaceful evening to enjoy his success. But every time Dana walked by, he could sense the coldness in her presence. His mind began to wander, wondering if maybe he was overthinking things. Perhaps he was being too sensitive. After all, not everyone could be friendly all the time. But then, he overheard something that stopped him in his tracks. As Dana passed by, he caught a whisper between her and another waitress. It was soft enough that Marcus wasn't sure if it was meant to be heard, but the words hit him hard. "I bet he can't even afford to be here. Watch him squirm when the check comes," Dana said with a sneer. Marcus felt the weight of the comment sink deep into his chest. It wasn't just rude, it was deeply hurtful. The hurt wasn't just because Dana had assumed something about him based on his appearance. It was because he knew he didn't deserve to be treated like that. He had worked tirelessly to get where he was. The last thing he needed was to be judged by someone who didn't know him. The comment stung, but Marcus wasn't one to let someone else's ignorance ruin his evening. He took a deep breath and decided not to respond. Instead, he focused on his meal and tried to enjoy the evening the best he could. But his thoughts kept drifting back to Dana's words, and he couldn't shake the feeling of being looked down upon. Time passed, and Marcus was starting to think that maybe he should just leave. The evening he had hoped would be a celebration had turned into something much less enjoyable. Just as he began to consider paying and heading out, Dana returned to his table. With a forced smile, she placed his main course in front of him. Her attitude hadn't improved, and Marcus could tell that she was still judging him, though now it seemed like she was trying to hide it. When Marcus picked up his fork to take his first bite, Dana asked, "Will you be paying with cash or card tonight?" It was an innocent enough question, but it carried an edge. She was still treating him like he didn't belong. Without hesitation, Marcus replied, "I'll pay with card." Dana, with her usual lack of warmth, didn't respond right away. Instead, she took his card, swiping it through the machine, and walking off without another word. Marcus watched her go, unsure of what to make of the situation. As she disappeared behind a corner, he tried to focus on his meal. But that whisper, those harsh words, kept echoing in his mind, making it harder to enjoy the food that had once seemed so promising. What he didn't know was that things were about to take a sharp turn, and the evening was far from over. While Marcus tried to stay calm and composed, something far bigger was happening behind the scenes. Dana's careless attitude was about to catch up with her in a way that no one could have predicted, and the karma she had unknowingly set in motion was about to strike, sending the entire night in a completely unexpected direction. As Marcus continued to sit at the table, lost in his thoughts, the minutes seemed to stretch on. His meal, which should have been a source of enjoyment, felt more like a distraction from the unease he was experiencing. He couldn't stop replaying the conversation he had overheard earlier, and the more he thought about it, the more frustrated he became. It wasn't just the words Dana had said. It was the fact that she had treated him as if he didn't deserve to be there, that his success was somehow less important than anyone else's. Despite the frustration, Marcus did his best to stay composed. He knew that reacting negatively wouldn't solve anything. But inside, the injustice simmered. It was the principle of the matter. How dare someone assume they knew him based solely on his appearance? How could someone in a service role, supposed to show respect to all customers, treat him with such disdain? As he was about to take another bite of his meal, he noticed the restaurant's manager, Mr. Ellison, walking towards his table. The manager was a calm, professional man who always seemed to have everything under control. Marcus didn't expect anything out of the ordinary, but when Mr. Ellison approached, he could see that his expression was serious, almost concerned. "Mr. Williams, how is everything tonight?" Mr. Ellison asked with a polite smile, though his tone held a hint of something more. Marcus was taken off guard by the question, but quickly composed himself. He smiled back, deciding that now wasn't the time to complain. "Everything's fine," he replied, "but I have to admit, I feel a bit uncomfortable." Mr. Ellison raised an eyebrow, clearly noticing the underlying tension. "Uncomfortable? Would you care to share more?" he asked, taking a step closer. Without missing a beat, Marcus explained what had happened. He didn't go into too much detail, but he mentioned how Dana had treated him differently from the other customers, and how her words had made him feel unwelcome. He spoke calmly but firmly, determined to share his experience without sounding overly emotional. As Marcus finished speaking, Mr. Ellison stood silently for a moment. His face hardened as he processed what Marcus had just said. He was a man of integrity, and it was clear that he didn't tolerate any form of disrespect in his restaurant. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Mr. Ellison said quietly. "I assure you that I will take immediate action." He paused for a moment, glancing around as if considering his next steps. Then, in a tone that was a little firmer, he added, "I'm terribly sorry that you had to experience this. We take our guests' comfort very seriously here." Marcus nodded, still a little shaken but relieved that the manager had taken his concerns seriously. He hadn't expected much from the situation, but it was clear that Mr. Ellison wasn't just brushing it off. Before Marcus could say anything else, Mr. Ellison turned and walked away, his eyes scanning the restaurant as he did. Marcus watched him disappear behind a set of doors that led to the kitchen, but he could tell from the manager's demeanor that something was about to change. As the seconds ticked by, Marcus sat back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew this wasn't over. Something had shifted, and the way things were unfolding made him feel that the injustice he had endured might just come to light in a way he never expected. Little did he know, Mr. Ellison's next move would turn the tables in a way that no one saw coming. Marcus sat in quiet anticipation, unsure of what was going to happen next. He watched the restaurant manager, Mr. Ellison, disappear behind the kitchen doors, his mind racing with curiosity. What could Mr. Ellison do about the situation? Would Dana be confronted about her behavior? As the seconds passed, Marcus tried to push his thoughts aside and focus on the meal in front of him. Though the taste of the food no longer seemed to matter, he just wanted to know how things would unfold. The atmosphere in the restaurant remained calm, but Marcus couldn't help but notice the way some of the other staff members were glancing his way. It was subtle, but their eyes seemed to linger on him, as if they were waiting for something to happen. He had the distinct feeling that the word was spreading. Whatever Mr. Ellison was going to do, it wasn't going to be small. Marcus felt a slight shift in the air, a sense that something important was about to take place. Just as he was wondering if Mr. Ellison had forgotten about him, the manager returned to the dining area. He walked directly toward Marcus's table, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him were two other staff members, one of whom was Dana. The look on her face was a mix of confusion and nervousness, and Marcus could see that she was already aware something was wrong. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by a tense, almost anxious demeanor. Mr. Ellison stopped at Marcus's table and addressed him directly. "Mr. Williams, I want to sincerely apologize once again for the treatment you've received tonight," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've had the chance to speak with Dana, and it seems there have been some serious misunderstandings. However, I want to make it clear that her behavior was not only unacceptable, it goes against the values we uphold here." Dana opened her mouth as if to speak, but Mr. Ellison held up a hand, silencing her. "We take pride in providing a welcoming and respectful environment for every guest, and that includes treating them with the dignity they deserve, no matter who they are or where they come from." His eyes shifted briefly to Dana, and Marcus could see the weight of his words sinking in. Dana's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and defensiveness, but she didn't say a word. Marcus, though still a little stunned by how quickly things had escalated, felt a sense of relief wash over him. He hadn't expected the manager to take such swift action, and it was clear that Mr. Ellison wasn't going to let the matter slide. Dana, however, looked visibly uncomfortable, her eyes shifting from the manager to Marcus, her hands nervously clasped in front of her. "We will be taking appropriate action," Mr. Ellison continued, his voice unwavering. "And Dana, I'm afraid that means you will no longer be working here. We cannot allow any staff member to represent us with such a lack of professionalism." Dana's eyes widened in shock, and she opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. It was as if she had suddenly lost her voice. Marcus, still processing everything, sat quietly, trying to absorb what was happening. He wasn't happy that someone had lost their job, but it wasn't hard to understand why Mr. Ellison had taken such drastic action. What Dana had done wasn't just rude. It was an outright insult to a customer, and the restaurant couldn't afford to allow that to continue. As Mr. Ellison turned toward the other staff members, signaling them to escort Dana out, the silence in the restaurant was palpable. Dana stood there for a moment, almost frozen, as the reality of her situation began to sink in. Her expression was one of disbelief and regret, but it was clear that the damage had been done. Marcus, still unsure how to feel about it all, quietly nodded in the manager's direction. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice steady but reflective. He didn't want to see anyone lose their job, but he also understood that Dana's actions had consequences. With Dana now escorted out of the restaurant, Marcus could feel a sense of closure beginning to settle in. The tension in the air had dissipated, and though the evening hadn't gone as planned, he now felt a small sense of justice. What started as a humiliating experience had transformed into something else, something unexpected. And little did he know, this wasn't the end of the story. Dana's downfall had already started, and the ripple effects of her actions would soon be felt by others in a way that none of them could have anticipated. As Dana was escorted out, Marcus couldn't help but feel a mixture of emotions. Part of him felt uneasy about the way things had unfolded. After all, Dana wasn't the only person to have a bad day, and losing her job might not have been an easy thing for her to deal with. But another part of him felt relief. He had been treated unfairly, and now the situation had been addressed, even if it wasn't the way he had originally expected. The staff who had witnessed the scene seemed to share a quiet understanding. There was no celebration or sense of triumph. Instead, there was a hum of subdued acknowledgement, like they knew that what had happened wasn't just about one person being punished. It was a larger lesson about respect, fairness, and doing the right thing. Mr. Ellison, after seeing Dana out, returned to Marcus's table, his demeanor still serious but now softened with a hint of empathy. "I truly apologize for what happened tonight, Mr. Williams," he said. "This is not how we operate here, and I'm sorry that you had to experience such behavior. We will make sure this doesn't happen again." Marcus nodded, appreciating the manager's honesty. "I understand," he said, his voice calm. "I just want to be treated with respect, like any other customer." Mr. Ellison agreed. "Absolutely. You should expect nothing less. I will ensure that the rest of the team receives additional training on this matter, and I will personally oversee it." For the first time that night, Marcus felt like he could finally relax. He had come to the restaurant for a celebration, and while it had been disrupted, there was a sense of resolution in the air. The evening wasn't a total loss, and Marcus now felt that at least his voice had been heard. As he finished his meal, Marcus noticed that the staff who had once been distant or uncomfortable now seemed warmer. His waitress for the remainder of the meal, another member of the team, treated him with kindness and respect. She checked in on him regularly, making sure everything was to his liking, and she genuinely seemed to care about his experience. It was a small gesture, but it went a long way in reminding Marcus that not everyone shared the same views as Dana. It also made him feel that the restaurant had taken his feedback seriously and was working to make things right. After his meal, Marcus was given the bill, and he was pleasantly surprised to find that his entire dinner had been comped. The gesture was unexpected, but it showed that the restaurant was not only apologizing, but also doing what it could to make up for the unpleasant experience he'd had. Mr. Ellison came over once more to check on him. "I just wanted to ensure that you were satisfied with your meal," Mr. Ellison said, smiling kindly. "And I'd like to personally invite you back to dine with us again, on the house, whenever you wish. We hope to see you again soon." Marcus appreciated the offer. It wasn't about the free meal. It was about the principle behind it. The manager's actions showed that the restaurant cared about more than just making money. They genuinely valued their customers and wanted to make sure they had a positive experience. As Marcus left the restaurant, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't the night he had originally planned, but it had turned into something more meaningful. The experience had reminded him that standing up for himself was important, even when it wasn't easy, and that sometimes speaking up could lead to change. What he hadn't realized was that his actions, and the restaurant's quick response, would set off a chain of events that went far beyond this single incident. The lessons learned tonight would echo through the restaurant staff, and Dana's actions would leave a lasting mark, not just on her own life, but on the way people saw the importance of treating everyone with kindness and respect. The ripple effects were just beginning, and Marcus had no idea that his quiet stand for fairness would ultimately help spark a broader change. The days following Marcus's experience at the restaurant were full of quiet reflection. He found himself thinking about the events over and over, piecing them together in his mind. He had never expected that a night out to celebrate his achievements would lead to such an unexpected turn of events. The discomfort he had felt in the restaurant still lingered in his thoughts, but something about the way the manager had handled the situation gave him a sense of closure. It wasn't just about the meal, or even the way Donna had been treated. It was about the bigger picture. Marcus realized that in a world where people are too often judged by their appearances or the assumptions others make about them, standing up for what's right was more important than ever. He had done what he could to voice his concerns without anger, and in return, the restaurant had shown that they valued his words and were willing to take action. It made him feel like he had made a difference, however small it seemed. Meanwhile, word of the incident at the restaurant began to spread, first among the staff, then among the regular customers. In the days after Marcus's visit, several people reached out to him, including old friends, colleagues, and even strangers who had heard about the situation. Many expressed their support, applauding him for not letting the disrespect slide and for speaking up when he could have easily walked away. It became clear that Marcus's story wasn't just about a single negative experience. It was about the power of standing up against injustice, no matter how subtle or unintentional it might seem. The local community, which had long known of Marcus's reputation as a hardworking and driven individual, began to take more notice of his story. People who had never spoken to him before started striking up conversations, asking him about his experience and what had driven him to speak out. His actions had sparked a conversation about how people treat each other in public spaces, how small gestures of kindness, or the lack of them, could affect someone's day, and ultimately, their sense of self-worth. As for Donna, the situation was much more complicated. After being let go from the restaurant, she found herself in a difficult position. The news of her dismissal spread quickly, and many people were quick to judge her. While some believed she deserved the consequences of her actions, others wondered if she had been given the opportunity to learn from her mistake. Donna herself was overwhelmed with regret, unsure of how things had gotten so out of hand. She had never intended for her behavior to reach such a breaking point. It had started as a small, careless action, ignoring a customer, making assumptions, but it had grown into something far bigger, with consequences she had never anticipated. Dana's experience became a turning point for her as well. After losing her job, she spent several days reflecting on her actions and what had led to that moment. She reached out to her former manager, Mr. Ellison, asking for guidance and advice. To her surprise, Mr. Ellison was understanding and offered her the opportunity to enroll in a training program that focused on customer service, empathy, and the importance of treating everyone with respect. While it wasn't a quick fix, it was a chance for Dana to grow and learn from her mistake, to move forward with a better understanding of how her actions impacted others. Through it all, Marcus continued with his life, focused on his business and the goals he had set for himself. He appreciated the support he had received from his community and didn't take it for granted. What had started as a painful experience had turned into a reminder that even small actions could have a big impact. It wasn't just about being right. It was about standing up for fairness, integrity, and respect. In the end, Marcus realized that the journey he had gone on wasn't just about one bad night at a restaurant. It was about learning to stand tall in the face of unfairness, to push through discomfort, and to inspire others to do the same. What started as a moment of personal frustration had transformed into something much larger, an opportunity to reflect on the values that truly mattered and to make the world just a little bit better by holding on to them. Weeks passed, and Marcus found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed since that evening at the restaurant. He had gone into that night with only one goal: to celebrate his hard work. But as it turned out, that night had become a significant turning point, not only for him, but for others as well. The small, unexpected event of being treated unfairly by a waitress had sparked a much larger ripple effect. Marcus began receiving messages from people who had been touched by his actions. Some shared their own stories of being mistreated or judged unfairly, and others simply thanked him for speaking out. It was humbling to realize that his choice to stand up for himself had inspired others to do the same in their own lives, whether it was in their workplaces, schools, or communities. Marcus hadn't set out to become a symbol of courage, but in a way, that was exactly what he had become. He found that even small moments of standing up for what's right could lead to greater change. A few of his friends mentioned how they had started to speak out more when they saw unfair treatment around them. It felt good to know that his one action had sparked a wave of awareness in those he knew. It was a reminder that no one should stay silent when it came to respecting one another, especially when the situation felt wrong. Through this, Marcus had learned something invaluable: the importance of integrity. In a world where people sometimes felt too busy or afraid to speak up, he understood that his voice mattered. It wasn't about confrontation or making a scene. It was about the principle of treating people equally and fairly. The more Marcus reflected on his actions, the more he realized how far-reaching this could be, even in ways he hadn't yet imagined. Meanwhile, Dana's journey had also taken an unexpected turn. After spending some time reflecting on her actions, she had made the decision to pursue training in customer service and empathy. She enrolled in a program that focused on helping people understand the importance of respect and fairness. It was clear that she was taking the situation seriously and was committed to making things right. Her journey wasn't an easy one, and it would take time for her to rebuild her reputation. But Dana's willingness to learn and grow gave Marcus hope that she could turn things around. She eventually reached out to Marcus, sending him a heartfelt message of apology. She admitted that her actions had been wrong and expressed regret for how she had treated him. She also thanked him for being the catalyst for her own self-improvement. While Marcus wasn't sure how to respond right away, he appreciated her honesty. He understood that people could change, especially if they were willing to learn from their mistakes. The fact that Dana was taking responsibility for her actions showed that she was ready to move forward, and that was a step in the right direction. As Marcus's life slowly returned to normal, he continued to focus on his work and personal growth. But now, he felt even more deeply connected to the idea that standing up for what's right, no matter how small the action, could lead to greater change. The lesson he had learned wasn't just about challenging the wrongs when they happened to him. It was about creating an environment where people felt empowered to speak up, to treat each other with respect, and to learn from their experiences. It wasn't always easy, and sometimes it felt like the world moved too quickly to make a difference. But Marcus had learned that change didn't happen overnight. It was the small acts of courage, the willingness to stand tall in the face of unfairness, that eventually added up to something bigger. The ripple effect of his actions, however small they may have seemed at the time, had proven that doing the right thing could impact the world in ways no one could predict. As the months went by, the events of that night in the restaurant began to fade into the background of Marcus's life. The lessons he had learned from the experience, however, stayed with him. He continued to receive the occasional message from people who had heard his story, each person sharing how they had been inspired to stand up for themselves in their own lives. It was a quiet kind of affirmation that told him he had done the right thing, even if it hadn't been easy in the moment. Marcus also noticed a subtle change in the way he approached challenges, where once he might have kept his head down and accepted things that felt unfair or wrong. Now he felt more confident in voicing his thoughts, especially when it came to standing up for others. His experience at the restaurant had reminded him of the power of one voice and how a single action could create a ripple effect, leading to positive change. He didn't expect to see Dana again, but fate had a way of surprising him. One day, several months later, Marcus walked into a local cafe where he often stopped for coffee. To his surprise, Dana was standing behind the counter, serving customers with a friendly smile. She seemed different, more open, more genuine. She greeted him as he approached the counter, her expression a mix of nervousness and sincerity. "Marcus, I just want to thank you again," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I've been working here for a while now, and I just wanted to let you know that your actions that night truly changed me. I've learned so much since then, and I'll never forget how you stood up for yourself and how that led me to look at my own actions." Marcus was taken aback. He hadn't expected this moment, but he could hear the sincerity in her voice. He nodded slowly, a small smile forming on his lips. "I'm glad to hear that you've taken it to heart," he said. "We all make mistakes, but it's how we learn from them that counts." Dana smiled, looking relieved. "I wanted to apologize again. What I did was wrong, and I truly regret it. I've worked hard to become better, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to make amends." Marcus felt a sense of peace wash over him. This wasn't about forgiveness, it was about growth. Dana had taken responsibility for her actions, and now she was actively working to better herself. It was a powerful reminder that change was possible, that people could learn and grow, even from the mistakes they made. As Marcus left the cafe that day, he couldn't help but feel grateful for the journey he had been on. What started as an uncomfortable and frustrating situation had led to personal growth, not just for him, but for Dana as well. He had learned that standing up for oneself didn't just change the course of an evening, it could shape the course of someone's life. The ripple effect of his actions, however small they seemed at the time, had created a wave of change that continued to touch people in ways he couldn't have anticipated. He had reminded himself that it wasn't always about big, dramatic actions. Sometimes, simply doing what was right in a moment of discomfort could lead to transformation, both for the individual and for the larger community. As Marcus walked out into the sunlight, he knew that life would continue to present challenges, but he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He understood now that the power of his actions, the power of standing up for what was right, wasn't limited to one experience. It was something he could carry with him for the rest of his life. And as he moved forward, he would keep that lesson close to his heart, knowing that no matter what came his way, he had the strength to speak out, to make a difference, and to inspire change in the world around him.